Something you said that really jumped out at me that will, I guess, constitute us going off on a bit of a tangent
Right.
is that you suspect performance art was the first art. And I
Mhm.
hadn't ever thought about this before you mentioned it, but as soon as you said it, I thought, there's something to that. Uh, Pretense or children engage in pretend play
Yes.
very early on in their
Mhm.
development. And I mean, we pick up a banana, we talk to the banana and pretend it's a phone, and we understand that as children. And it does strike me as quite possible that before we realized that other objects could be used to represent other objects, we ourselves could represent other people or objects. Is that sort of what you have in mind when you say that you suspect performance art was the first art?
Exactly. It's right up the alley of what I was talking about. And also not just children, but animals. The way that animal play often is pretend fighting. It's amazing how animals just know how to do that. And I think
Right.
specifically, you mentioned another thing about children is they love masks. And I suspect that masks may have been among the first artworks. We all know about cave paintings because they're very durable. We have cave paintings that are tens
That's
of
great.
thousands of years old. Masks aren't going to last that long, but I had a very powerful experience years ago where I was in graduate school. I was invited to a Halloween costume party. I procrastinated. I left my costume to the last minute. So I'm at the costume store on the afternoon of the 31st of October, and there wasn't much left. The only half decent object left was a really scary looking zebra mask from Tanzania. It had kind of smoky looking eyes, like it had risen from the dead. And then I came up with the proper clothing to wear with that, a black turtleneck with white adhesive tape stripes. So I went and I won the contest. People loved my costume. And then I took it to my parents in Iowa and left it in a locked cabinet for years. And then years later, I was back visiting my parents and I noticed that mask. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I remember this." And I pulled it out and put it on. And my parents' two dogs more or less lost their minds when I put it on. Even though these dogs had known me since they were puppies, they knew what I smelled like, and smell is much more important for dogs, of course, right? But they were barking at me like I was truly a monster and they wanted me dead. And one of the dogs actually came up to the side and jumped up and knocked the mask off my face. He was so disturbed by this. So that somehow when you put on a mask, you are transformed, especially for animals and children. A child can put on a Spider-Man mask or a Batman mask, and they think you can't see them. And then in the adult realm, the mask of the Ku Klux Klan. What is so terrifying about that? It's not just that it symbolizes certain abhorrent racist views. It's that the mask itself is also terrifying. It makes them somehow inhuman. Just the fact that they're wearing that. They wouldn't be nearly as scary if you saw their faces. So, yes, performance. And then, as I mentioned before, speech act theory has picked up on the very powerful force of performative statements as opposed to constitutive ones. The fact that they actually commit you to something, they change your reality in a way that simply making prose statements does not. And almost any statement can be made ironically. And then there's the question as to whether or not making the statement ironically really changes the meaning of it. And this is a big thing for Zizek. Maybe this will come up when you talk to him. But Zizek, one of my favorite stories about him is he was watching a documentary on neo-Nazis in Berlin. And the interviewer asked the leader, why are you a neo-Nazi? And he expected this stream of racist invective in return. And instead, the neo-Nazi said, "I'm a neo-Nazi because of the breakdown of paternal authority and diminishing social mobility." And so in a way, he's giving himself a distance from neo-Nazism because he's above it. He's talking about it like a sociologist, analyzing the root causes of why he became a neo-Nazi. But then Zizek's point is, yeah, but he's still a neo-Nazi. That doesn't get him off the hook. He's still making these statements, and there's still something performative about it, even though he's pretending to be the scientist speaking about it objectively. Another example that comes to mind is The Onion. I don't know if you read The Onion at all, America's great humor newspaper. There's a fantastic editorial from years ago called "Why Can't Anyone Tell That I'm Wearing This Business Suit Ironically?" And it's about this guy who started off wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase to parties ironically. And his friends started calling him a sellout. And he says, wow, my irony just sailed right over their head. They actually think I'm doing this seriously. And then he goes and talks about the rest of his life, that he ironically went to law school, ironically started working for this corporate law firm, and people think he's serious. How stupid are they? He ironically married this clueless girl from Connecticut who likes shopping. And then finally they had these two ironic kids who look like something out of a Dick and Jane book. The point being, he's been as ironic as he can possibly be, and yet this has been his life. And so there's a question there about the status of irony and about whether some performativity doesn't sneak into it at the end somehow. Anyway, these are just different versions of my critique of literalism. The idea that simply making a statement about the properties of things is an adequate relation to them. And my sense that things like aesthetics that involve the beholder of an artwork actually tell us more powerful things about reality and how it works. Also, we have in continental philosophy Alain Badiou, who has kind of extended this Kierkegaardian theme in his work. Badiou is all about truths, right? He thinks that basically most of human life is about boring situations. Things are going along normally, nothing's happening, we're all living our mediocre, banal lives, and then suddenly someone grasps a truth, and he thinks there are political truths, which for him are always communist revolutionary ones. There are aesthetic truths, there are scientific truths like quantum theory, and then there are amorous truths, falling in love, whether you're married or not. An amorous truth has infinite implications and you have to commit yourself to it regardless of the consequences. That's another part of his theory. But what interests me for the moment about Badiou's theory is he says a truth requires fidelity, that a truth is not a truth unless someone retroactively is faithful to it. So in a way, truths only appear after they first appear. Someone has to look back at a truth and say, yes, that was a truth that briefly appeared in our mediocre human world, and I'm going to commit myself to it and await the next one. I'll await the next revolution because I really believe in the Russian Revolution, or whichever one it was. And what I like about that is the way he is bringing this performative dimension into truth the same way as Kierkegaard was. The idea that justification is not enough in philosophy, that philosophy has a certain element of sincerity or fidelity in it that doesn't necessarily occur in science, again, because a scientist just has to go with the best evidence. They don't necessarily, you can have a scientist who sees no evidence for Christianity in their science, yet is still a faithful Christian at home. There's no problem with that. You couldn't really have that in philosophy, right? If someone's going to make the Kierkegaardian leap and become a Christian, that's going to reflect itself directly in their philosophy in a way that it might not in their physics.